Pokémon. Who doesn't love this franchise? That was a rhetorical question. Pokémon Gold was actually the first video game I ever owned, and being a Mythology fan, I couldn't help but notice over the years that some of these characters bear a striking resemblance to certain mythical creatures. So, why not make a video going over them? Let's start with the most obvious one, Ninetails. Based on the nine-tailed fox. Yeah, not much of a stretch there. The nine-tailed fox actually appears in several Asian cultures. In Korea, it's known as the kumiho. In Vietnam, the ho li tin. In China, the hu li jing. And in Japan, the kitsune. Nine-tailed foxes are described as intelligent, magical fox spirits that start with one tail, but gain more as they grow older and more powerful. This legend is echoed in some of Vulpix's Pokédex entries, and simply by the fact that it evolves into a version with more tails by literally growing stronger. Some kitsune serve the goddess Inari and will often use their abilities to guide and assist humans. However, there are also many wild kitsune who instead trick and manipulate people, even inflicting curses that last for generations. This is mentioned in Ninetails' Pokédex entry, along with the fact that some kitsune have outlived entire empires. One thing Pokémon doesn't adapt, however, is the kitsune's ability to shapeshift into different forms, including humans. One of the most famous was a fox named Tamamo no Mei, though she went by several other names during her lifetime. She also seduced and manipulated multiple emperors into committing atrocities for her amusement. Even after she was eventually slain, her lingering curses caused chaos throughout the lands. I'm watching you, Ninetails. You're not seducing any world leaders on my watch. Next up is Exeggutor. Now, Exeggutor has always been a pretty weird-looking Pokemon, but it makes more sense when you look at what he's based on, the Jinmenju. This creature is said to be a living tree with human heads growing from its branches that are always smiling. Yeah, that's not creepy at all. Apparently, if you laugh at the tree or try to ask it questions, it will only respond by laughing back at you. If you make the heads laugh for too long, though, they will fall from its branches. While Exeggutor's Pokédex entries don't seem to mention laughter, they do state that its heads sometimes fall off. Plus, he is pretty much always shown smiling. By the way, have you ever wondered why the Alolan Exeggutor is a dragon type? Of course you have. We all have. Plenty of people have joked about it. As far as I can tell, though, it's because of the type of tree that Alolan Exeggutor represents. You see, over on the island of Socotra, Yemen, there is a species of tree called Dracana cinnabari, which means dragon blood tree. There is a legend that long ago a dragon was either slain or wounded on that island, and from its blood sprouted these trees. This legend was inspired by the fact that the trees excrete blood-red sap. Pretty cool, huh? Now, you're probably thinking these trees look nothing like Alolan Exeggutor, and you'd be right. However, there is a variant of them in Hawaii, which is the place Alola is based on, and this version's appearance matches up a lot more. But enough about trees, let's talk about Meowth. Based on the Maneki Neko. You've surely seen these little cat figures in all sorts of Asian businesses, and that's because these things are said to bring good luck and good fortune to their owners. It is believed that one of their paws can bring in customers, while the other paw can bring riches, so in order to activate that ability, they are often depicted with one paw raised in a beckoning gesture, which is exactly how Meowth was depicted in several of the games. Sometimes they even have both paws raised. They are also often shown with a Koban coin to symbolize the wealth that they bring, which you may notice looks eerily similar to a certain item on top of Meowth's head. This is also likely why Meowth can use Payday, you know, the move that scatters coins all over the place. What's funny about this is there are several tales of Maneki Nekos improving the lives and luck and fates of all the people they encounter, and yet Team Rocket doesn't seem to be getting any of those results from their Meowth.
If we grab Swablu, we grab happiness!
This will finally change our luck!
We're blasting off again!
Sucks to be them, I guess. Then there's Galarian Meowth, which is based on a type of cat the Vikings had. This is why it evolves into a new Pokemon called Berserker, clearly based on Viking berserkers, and its Pokédex entry even states how it lives for the thrill of battle, something berserkers were also known for. Man, what a jump! Going from a cute Japanese charm to a drugged-up Norse warrior. Speaking of big jumps, why exactly does an extremely weak fish like Magikarp evolve into the dragon-like powerhouse that is Gyarados? Well, it most likely has to do with a particular Chinese legend involving a powerful waterfall that leads to a dragon gate. The legend states that vast numbers of carpfish regularly attempt to swim up this waterfall, with very few successfully making it to the gate. But the ones that do become dragons as a reward. There's also a Japanese version of this tale where a koi fish insists on pushing itself to the top of a waterfall despite his weakness and the fact that all the other fish have given up. After many attempts, he finally becomes strong enough to succeed, and the gods turn him into a great golden dragon to signify his success. Yay, happy ending. This transformation from a fish into a dragon is obviously echoed by Magikarp's evolution. Yes, I know Gyarados isn't technically a dragon, but this isn't 10 Pokemon whose details make no goddamn sense! The difficulty of leveling up a weak Pokemon like Magikarp also works as an analogy for the struggle of the fish to reach the top. And of course, there's the rewarding feeling when you finally get Gyarados. Plus, the fact that they were literally carp in the Chinese story, Magikarp, come on. But then we get to a Pokemon who definitely deviates more from the source, and that is Slowbro, based on the Japanese Saze Oni. Saze Oni are turban snail demons that resemble a large pink body emerging from a shell. Very similar appearance to Slowbro. In fact, Saze Oni are sometimes depicted with the shell on their heads, which resembles the alternate evolution Slowking. It's certainly a looser inspiration since lore-wise Slowbro doesn't emerge from a shell, he's actually just being bitten by a separate Pokemon named Shelder. But the pink color, the positions of the shells, and the fact that it's specifically a turban snail has me confident that there was at least some inspiration. Definitely not lore-wise though, since the Saze Oni often disguises itself as a beautiful woman in the ocean in order to trick sailors into taking her in, then sleeps with the sailors, steals their testicles, and ransoms them back in exchange for treasure. Somehow I doubt Slowbro has similar hobbies. At least I hope to God he doesn't. Another interesting thing to mention, though, is where Saze Oni come from. Their origin is simply, when a snail turns 30 years old, they become a Saze Oni. This is also the case for several other yokai, like Onikuma or Bakeneko. They simply change, or evolve, when they reach a certain age and become stronger. It's possible this could have at least partially inspired the way evolution works in Pokemon games, since they're literally evolving by leveling up, which indicates they're getting older and stronger, just like in the myths. Next is one of my personal favorites, Drowzee, based on the Japanese Baku. The Baku is a creature said to feed on dreams, mostly nightmares, and is considered a very helpful yokai for getting rid of them. Drowzee does the same thing, as listed in some of his Pokédex entries, and, well, the fact that he literally has a move called Dream Eater. The Baku was apparently created by the gods using leftover animal parts from all their other creations. Yeah, seriously. So, because of this, it has physical traits from several different beasts, but the most notable is its trunk, which is consistent in every depiction. Now, this is technically an elephant trunk, and Drowzee is more of a tapir, but interestingly enough, tapirs are actually called Baku in Japan, and supposedly named after the mythical creature. And if you still doubt me, just take a look at Drowzee's Pokédex entry from Fire Red, where it literally spells it out. What's also interesting is Drowzee may not even be the only Baku-based Pokemon. Several generations later, in Black and White, we got the Pokemon Muna and Musharna, who also have tapir-like features, and are also described as devourers of dreams and nightmares in their Pokédex entries. I've heard that Black and White were supposed to be a kind of reboot for the franchise, so maybe they just thought, well, we're rebooting it, and we're not complete without some
Baku-based Pokemon, throw a new one in there. I don't know.
So we might as well move on to Mawile. Now, Mawile has what appears to be a large second mouth with fangs on the back of his head, and that is very similar to the Futakuchi Onna, which translates to two-mouthed woman. A Futakuchi Onna's second mouth is often shown to be larger and more vicious than the regular mouth, which would match up with Mawile. Mawile's back mouth also seems to sprout from her head in the same way that hair would, and the Futakuchi Onna is pretty much always depicted with sentient black hair surrounding the second mouth. The creature has multiple origin stories. One states that she was a woman who refused to eat enough, and eventually her hunger manifested a second mouth that demanded food. Another has her as an evil stepmother who refused to feed her stepdaughter until she starved to death, at which point a second mouth erupted from the stepmother's head with the crying voice of her dead stepdaughter, which she now had to feed every day as eternal punishment. There is one other story where a man wants to get married but doesn't want to pay for extra food. Wow, what a dick. And so marries a beautiful, docile woman who never seems to eat anything, only to later find out that the back of her head has actually been doing all the eating. It's possible the third story may have inspired some of Mawile's lore, since its Pokédex entries literally say that it uses its docile front face to get opponents to drop their guard, before unleashing the second mouth. Yeah, makes sense. But you know what didn't make sense to me when I first played Gen 3? Whiscash. I remember thinking to myself, why is this obvious fish a ground type that can summon earthquakes? Well, it made a lot more sense when I learned about the Onamazu. For those who don't know, catfish like to bury themselves in the mud and will thrash about angrily if you encroach on their territory. And there were times in old Japan when citizens happened to see a catfish doing this shortly before an earthquake occurred. This, of course, led to rumors that the catfish were responsible for said earthquakes, which led to the legend of a gigantic, earth-shaking catfish known as Onamazu. There are many funny old illustrations of gods and warriors trying to calm the creature during his fits. It is said that Onamazu was eventually subdued by the god Takemikazuchi and imprisoned beneath the earth under the Kashima Shrine, as to prevent further disasters. And when earthquakes happen now, it is because Takemikazuchi has temporarily dropped his guard. Whiscash's Pokédex entries line up perfectly with these stories, so I think it's an open and shut case. Some sources even say he's directly referred to as Namazun in Japan. I don't speak Japanese, so feel free to correct me on that. Our next entry, thankfully, isn't quite as destructive, and that's Shiftry, based on the Japanese Tengu. And unlike the previous entries, these two share more similarities in their lore than their appearance. Let me explain. Now, Tengu are a type of humanoid bird yokai, and there are actually multiple types of them. Probably the most iconic and revered would be the Dai Tengu. These Tengu typically have red skin, wings, and long noses. While lesser Tengu like to terrorize mankind, the Dai Tengu are mysterious guardians who prefer to live in solitude up in the mountains and focus on bettering themselves. They possess great wisdom and skill, and will sometimes teach it to well-meaning travelers who seek them out. But they can also be dangerous to their enemies. Some are capable of causing natural disasters, most notably using a magic fan to create massive windstorms. So yeah, don't piss them off. Now, as I said, Shiftry doesn't have the exact appearance of a Tengu. He doesn't have the red skin or the wings, but he does have the long nose. He's also forest-themed, actually has fans for hands, and hilariously, his feet are shaped like Geta sandals, which Tengu are often depicted with. But the most telling is his Pokédex entries that describe him as a forest guardian who lives in seclusion and can create windstorms with his fans. Yeah. That's not a coincidence. And finally, it wouldn't be much of a Pokemon video if we didn't somehow acknowledge Pikachu. Well, mostly Raichu. But also, kind of, Pikachu. Sort of. Hear me out. You see, in Japanese mythology, there is a thunder god named Raijin, and from his storms come monsters known as Raiju, or thunder beasts. They live in the sky, creating storm clouds, and sometimes ride lightning bolts down to the earth and cause fires and destruction wherever they land. Now, the Raiju are commonly depicted as thunderous wolves, but they are not limited to that form. They have been said to take the forms of all manner of different animals. In fact, the most popular one was a chimera-like Raiju called the Nue, resembling a monkey, tiger, tanuki, and snake all merged together. I wouldn't be surprised if Pikachu and Raichu were partly based on these creatures, seeing as they are thunder beasts, and the fact that Raichu sounds so much like Raiju. Okay, it's not lost on me that that isn't the strongest evidence, and this is definitely the loosest connection out of all the others in this video, especially since the Pokédex entries don't really say anything to back it up. I just really wanted to address a possible mythical origin for Pikachu. But you know which Pokemon actually do have a stronger connection to the Raiju? Raikou and Manectric. Once again, there's the name. Raikou sounds an awful lot like Raiju, but more importantly, there's the Pokédex entries. Raikou is literally said to have descended to the earth with the lightning, much like in the myth, and creates storm clouds and thunderbolts wherever it goes. Manectric is described similarly, creating storm clouds and fires at will, and residing where lightning has struck. Manectric is also a blue wolf, which, as I said earlier, is a common depiction for the Raiju. So yeah, I know this entry was more of a 3-for-1, but I really wanted to go over all the possibilities for this yokai.
So yeah, that's 10 Pokemon who I'm pretty sure were based on mythical creatures. Okay, technically it was more than 10. Big whoop, what, you gonna whine about it? I gave you more content than I promised.
And finally, as a little bonus, I'm going to propose a theory as to the inspiration behind Pokemon itself. Have you ever heard of Shikigami? Shikigami are powerful Japanese creatures or spirits who live to serve the whims of the humans who control them. They can take many forms, including those of animals, people, or even monsters, and follow any direction their owner gives. However, an inexperienced owner may lose control of their Shikigami, kinda similar to how a Pokemon will disobey you if you don't have enough badges. So yeah, I've done it! I cracked the code! I now know the origin of the entire idea of Pokemon! Oh. Okay, I may have overthought this. I guess not everything has to have an origin rooted in mythology, and it's honestly really cool to think about how something as simple as a childhood bug collecting hobby can end up inspiring one of the biggest franchises of all time. There's obviously other examples of myth-inspired Pokemon, so let me know if you'd like to see more. And I don't know how to end videos.